In the quiet hours of the night, when the world grows still and the mind begins to wander, there are stories that echo from the ancient past. Stories of civilizations that rose from dust, shaped the world, and then returned to dust again. But among them, one stands apart, like a dream that never truly died. It is the story of Greece. Not the Greece we know today, not the glittering islands of tourists and postcards, but an older Greece. A Greece of gods who walked like men, and men who dreamed of becoming gods. A Greece of marble temples gleaming under sunlight, and dark councils meeting under the cover of stars. A Greece where philosophy, war, art, mathematics, and myth were not separate things, but part of a single breath of life. This was a land where every stone had a spirit, every mountain held a secret, every sea carried whispers from an age before memory. A land where the boundary between the divine and the human was not a wall, but a doorway, and those who stepped through it changed the world forever. But here is the haunting question. How did a small, fragmented collection of rocky city-states, places no larger than towns, create ideas that would shape the entire course of human civilization? How did they give us democracy, tragedy, logic, the Olympics, architecture that still stands when empires have crumbled into sand? And how did it all fall? Not in a single moment, like Rome with its flames, but slowly, quietly, like a candle burning itself away. Tonight, we travel not simply through history, but into memory itself, into a world of heroes and poets, kings and tyrants, philosophers and warriors, sailors and dreamers, into a world where reality feels like myth, and myth feels like truth. Before we continue this journey, tell us in the comments, where in the world are you listening from tonight? Take a quiet breath. Let the noise of the present fall away, and let us begin at the very beginning. Long before Athens and Sparta stood as towering names, long before Homer sang of Troy, long before marble and bronze shaped the world, there was only the sea, and the islands scattered like stepping stones across its vast blue emptiness. The Aegean, a cradle of winds and waves, a bridge between east and west, a gateway where cultures flowed and collided, not in openness, but in whispers. This sea did not give life easily. It demanded courage, skill, and imagination. And so the people who lived beside it learned to sail, to trade, to adapt. They built their homes not around rivers or fertile plains, but around the tides and the stars. And from this sea the first Greek civilization emerged, like a shadow rising from depth. The Minoans of Crete. They danced with bulls, painted with color, and built palaces without walls, as if they feared no enemy. Their art flowed like water. Their script remains partly unreadable, as if their voices are still hidden behind the waves. But even great civilizations have storms waiting for them in the dark. Volcano, fire, collapse, silence. Yet the story did not end there. From the ashes of the old, something new begins to stir. Warriors from the mainland, forging bronze and legend. A people who would storm the city of Troy and carve their names into eternity. The Mycenaeans, the world of heroes. The world of Achilles, Agamemnon, Odysseus. names that linger in our collective memory like echoes that never fully fade. Their world rose, and then it too fell, and the darkness that followed would nearly erase everything, but something survived. A memory, a whisper, a spark. A spark that would one day ignite the golden age of Greece, philosophy, theater, democracy, empire, all of it waiting, hidden inside that ember. We are going to follow that ember, trace its path, watch it burn bright and burn out. The story of Greece is not the story of one rise or one fall, but of many. And it begins now. The world we step into now is older than written memory, older than carved marble, older even than the myths that later poets would sing. It is a world half lit, like a dream recalled just after waking. Historians call it the Bronze Age, but the people living in it would not have recognized such a name. They knew only their land, their sea, their gods, and their stories. Picture the Aegean world around 3,000 years ago. The sea is everything. It is road, barrier, and mystery. At dawn, its surface glimmers pale silver as sunlight crawls over the waves. At night, it becomes black glass scattered with starlight. The people who live along its coasts learn early that the sea rewards the brave and punishes the careless. It gives fish and trade, but it also takes ships without warning. This world is not unified. There is no single Greece yet. Instead, the land is broken into mountain valleys and scattered islands. Each valley holds its own village, each village its own laws, each island its own customs. The mountains do not connect. They divide. The sea does not separate. It links. And so the people who live here become travelers, sailors, navigators of the uncertain. From this landscape emerges the Minoans, the earliest great power of the Aegean. Their heart is the island of Crete, a land of green hills, rocky cliffs, and warm winds that travel up from the southern seas. The Minoans build palaces unlike anything else in the ancient world, not fortresses of war, but labyrinths of art and corridors, open courtyards and flowing stairways. Their walls show images of dancers, lepers, and swirling patterns of red and blue. They worship gods who are close to nature, the mother goddess, the bull, the snake. Their world moves with rhythm, dance, procession, celebration. Life is not armored yet. It flows like water. Their ships move across the Aegean, carrying pottery, spices, stories, and influence. For a time, it seems as though they are untouchable. But the ancient world never stands still. To the north, on the Greek mainland, a new people rise, the Mycenaeans. They build citadels of stone. Their kings wear gold masks. Their swords are heavy, their armor shining bronze. They are warriors, traders, and storytellers. They look upon Crete not with admiration, but ambition. Sometime around 1450 BCE, the palaces of Crete fall silent. Whether by invasion, internal turmoil, or the roar of the volcano Thera erupting into the sky, the result is the same. The Minoan world collapses, and the Mycenaeans step into its place, becoming the new lords of the Aegean. And it is from their world that legend is born. The war against Troy, the wrath of Achilles, the wanderings of Odysseus, songs sung by bards long before they were written down. But no golden age lasts forever. Around 1200 BCE, the Mycenaean citadels burn, trade routes collapse, writing disappears, whole regions fall silent. Historians call this time the Greek Dark Age, a period when art, architecture, and memory seem to flicker and fade, like a lamp running out of oil. And yet, even in darkness, something survives. Not buildings, not treasures, but stories. Stories carried in voice, stories recited at firesides, stories passed from one generation to the next across centuries. Stories that would eventually become the epics of Homer. Stories that would become the heartbeat of Greek identity. And slowly, over generations, the embers begin to glow again. Villages grow into towns. Trade returns along the seas. Language reforms. Writing returns. This time borrowed from the Phoenicians, reshaped into the Greek alphabet, the ancestor of nearly every alphabet used in the Western world today. The stage is set. Cities will rise, new ideas will be born. And a world unlike any seen before will unfold, one built not only on strength, but on thought. The era of myth is giving way to the era of memory. And soon, the cities of Athens and Sparta will begin to awaken. The darkness after the fall of the Mycenaeans did not remain forever. Slowly, almost quietly, life began to return. Small villages grew where once there had been palaces. Farmers cleared hillsides for grain and olives. Shepherds moved across rocky slopes with goats and sheep. Families gathered in open courtyards to talk, to trade, to remember. And as memory returned, so did something deeper: identity. This is when the Greeks began to form something new in the world, something that had never truly existed before. The polis, the city-state, not just a place of buildings, not just a government, but a living community, a shared identity. A polis was small, sometimes only a few thousand people. It began as a cluster of homes gathered around a central hill, the Acropolis, the high place. Below it spread the agora, the marketplace, where life unfolded in the open. Traders bargaining, elders debating, merchants calling out prices, and storytellers reciting verses to anyone who would listen. In the polis, a person was not simply an individual. They were part of a whole. To be Greek was not to belong to a nation, but to belong to a place, a people, a story, and yet, each polis was different. Some became traders, looking outward to the sea. Some became farmers, rooted in the soil. Some became warriors. And two of these city-states would become the poles around which Greek history would turn: Athens and Sparta. But before their rivalry, before their philosophies clashed and their armies marched, both cities were still forming themselves, shaped by hardship, necessity, and choice. Let us begin with Athens, a city of hills and open skies near the waters of the Aegean. The Athenians were restless, curious, eager to learn and eager to argue. They were not yet the Athens of philosophers and playwrights. They were divided, troubled, nearly broken by inequality. Rich landowners held power. The poor struggled, often falling into debt so deep they could be taken as slaves. The city teetered on the edge of collapse. And then came Solon, a reformer, a poet, a man who believed that a city is strongest when its people share in its destiny. He abolished debt slavery. He opened political life to more citizens. He planted the seed of a radical idea, that power did not need to belong only to the few. The idea did not blossom immediately. Change is never simple. But Solon had opened a door that would never again be fully closed. Over decades, through struggle, argument, and even tyranny, Athens moved slowly toward something bold, something the world had scarcely imagined. Demokratia, rule by the people. Citizens could gather, speak, vote, shape their world with their voices and hands. Not everyone was included. Women, slaves, and foreigners remained outside this circle. But the experiment had begun, and its influence would echo across thousands of years. Meanwhile, to the south, across mountains and river valleys, another city was forming along very different lines. Sparta. Where Athens debated, Sparta endured. Where Athens argued, Sparta obeyed. Where Athens opened itself to the sea, Sparta turned inward, disciplined, silent, watchful. The Spartans believed that freedom came not from participation, but from mastery. Mastery of oneself and mastery of the world around them. Their society was austere, stripped of luxury, shaped for one purpose: strength. Boys were taken from their homes at 7 to enter the Aegean, the long training that forged them into warriors. They learned to march, to fight, to suffer without complaint, to speak rarely and with precision. For a Spartan's words were to be like their spears, few, sharp, unforgettable. 2 Greek cities, 2 visions of life, one built on debate, one built on discipline. One celebrated the mind, the other the body, and though they did not yet know it, their destinies were already intertwined. For the ancient world was about to face a storm that would shake every polis, every coastline, every city-state to its core. A storm rising not from Greece, but from the east, the Persian Empire, a power vast beyond imagination, an empire of millions. A force that believed Greece was little more than a scattered cluster of villages waiting to be conquered. The Greeks would soon learn what it meant to fight not for land, not for trade, not for pride, but for existence itself. And the world would never be the same. The storm did not come suddenly. It began as a distant rumble, whispers of a vast empire rising in the east. The Persian Empire, stretching from the valleys of Mesopotamia to the mountains of Afghanistan, from the Nile to the Indus. A land of kings whose palaces gleamed with gold, whose armies numbered in the hundreds of thousands. A world so large that Greece, with its small city-states and clashing rivalries, seemed as insignificant as scattered pebbles before a mountain. But history has a quiet humor. Sometimes it is the smallest stones that divide the course of rivers. The first sparks were lit in a city far from Athens and Sparta, in Ionia, along the coast of Asia Minor. These Greeks lived under Persian rule, trading and thinking and speaking the same language as their cousins across the sea. But they did not like being ruled. Rebellion simmered, and when Athens, young and hopeful, sent ships to help them, Persia took notice. The great king Darius did not forget. To him, Greece was not just a place. It was an insult, a challenge to imperial dignity, something that must be answered. And so, the Persians crossed the sea. The first great clash came on the plain of Marathon, a quiet stretch of land near Athens. Here, the Athenians stood shoulder to shoulder, farmers, potters, merchants, and soldiers alike, facing an army far larger than their own. They had no walls to hide behind, no allies beside them, only the belief that their city, their polis, their freedom, was worth fighting for. They charged. The battle was brief, fierce, and unforgettable. Against the odds, the Athenians won. And the legend of the run to Athens, the message of victory, would echo forever in the word we still use today, marathon. But victory did not end the threat. Persia would return, and when it did, it would come with a king whose name still resonates like thunder, Xerxes. He was determined not simply to punish Greece, but to absorb it, to grind it into the Persian world, to make its cities bow in silence. And so he gathered an army so vast that ancient writers claimed it drank rivers dry. Whether that is true or not, what matters is how it felt, to see the horizon darken with spears, shields, horses, and banners. Greece was terrified. And yet, something remarkable happened. The city-states, always arguing, always competing, always on the edge of conflict, unified. Sparta would lead on land. Athens would command the sea. Two visions of Greece joined against a world-spanning empire. The first stand came at Thermopylae, the narrow mountain pass where a small force could hold back a massive army. Here, King Leonidas of Sparta and 300 Spartans, along with allies from other city-states, stood against the Persian tide. For 3 days, they held the pass. They fought not for victory, for victory was impossible. They fought to give Greece time to prepare, time to breathe, time to hope. When they fell knowing their stand would be remembered. And it was. But the war was far from over. The Persians marched south. Athens was evacuated. The city burned. The Parthenon did not yet exist, but the Acropolis itself became a blackened memory of flame. Athens had lost its home, but not its will. For on the sea, the Athenians prepared something bold. The narrow straits of Salamis. The Persian fleet was vast, but the waters were tight and twisting. Here, nimble Greek ships, triremes, long and sharp, rowed by citizens, could strike with precision. The Persians were forced into confusion. Wood shattered, oars splintered, men fell into the sea. The Greeks won, and with Salamis, the shape of the world shifted. The Persians retreated. Greece remained free. But freedom brought not unity, only pride, and pride has a shadow. The Athenians now felt destiny pulling at their shoulders. They had defeated the greatest empire known to man. They had defended the polis, the idea of citizenship, the voice of a people. And in the years that followed, Athens would rise higher than any city before it. But heights are dangerous, for the higher a flame rises, the more clearly it can be seen by the wind. The war with Persia left Greece standing, but it did more than that. It reshaped the spirit of Athens. The city that once trembled on the brink of collapse now saw itself as the defender of freedom, the voice of the people, the guardian of the Greek world. And with this new identity came confidence, ambition, and something even more powerful: vision. Athens entered an age that later generations would look back upon with awe. An age of marble, philosophy, drama, politics, and restless imagination. The world would remember it as the Golden Age. At the center of this transformation was one man, Pericles. Pericles did not rule as a king. Athens had no king. Instead, he led through persuasion, eloquence, and trust, a leader chosen again and again by the people. Under his guidance, Athens remade itself, not just physically, but mentally, spiritually, and culturally. Let us walk through Athens at this time. The air is warm. The streets are alive. The sound of footsteps on stone echoes between rows of homes and markets. At the heart of the city rises the Acropolis, the sacred high place. And upon it, gleaming beneath the sun, newly built and radiant, the Parthenon, a temple of marble so precise, so balanced, so elegant, it seems less like something constructed and more like something discovered, a form that always existed, simply revealed when the stone was carved away. Inside stood a towering statue of Athena, the city's patron, goddess of wisdom, of strategy, of subtle strength. Athens honored her not just in worship, but in spirit. This was a city of thought. In the agora below, citizens gathered not just to trade, but to speak, to argue, to question, to challenge. Ideas moved like the wind, unseen but felt everywhere. Knowledge was not guarded, it was pursued. Discussion was not avoided, it was celebrated. And in this fertile air walked some of the greatest minds humanity has ever known. Socrates, barefoot, wandering the marketplace, asking questions that unsettled the comfortable, not teaching answers, but shaping minds by forcing them to think. What is justice? He would ask. What is the good life? How do you know what you claim to know? His method was simple but revolutionary. He made thought itself into a discipline, the beginning of philosophy as we know it. And from Socrates came Plato, his student, who listened deeply, who gathered ideas into structure and form. Plato would write dialogues that still breathe today, conversations where reality and meaning collide like waves against stone. From Plato came Aristotle, the master of observation, who sought to understand the world not only through contemplation but through evidence. He studied plants, animals, stars, politics, poetry, everything. To him, knowledge was not a mystery. It was a map waiting to be drawn. These three, Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, formed a lineage of thought that would echo across millennia, shaping the foundations of logic, science, ethics, and reason. But Athens' brilliance was not limited to philosophy. It shone on the stage. The city built great theaters into the sides of hills, places where thousands could gather under the open sky. Here, actors wearing masks performed dramas, stories of gods, heroes, love, madness, fate. Aeschylus, Sophocles, Euripides, poets who wove tragedies that explored the deepest questions of human nature. Why do we suffer? Is fate unbreakable? Can a person truly escape who they are? Their plays were not entertainment alone. They were reflection, ritual, philosophy performed in the body's own language. And yet, beneath all this splendor, something darker stirred. Athens had grown powerful, not only respected, but feared. The League of Greek allies formed during the Persian Wars slowly transformed, under Athenian leadership, into something else, to an empire. Ships from subject cities brought grain, tribute, taxes. The Parthenon itself, that symbol of beauty, was built partly with funds taken from allies who were no longer quite free to choose. Athens, the city of liberty, was becoming something like a ruler. And Sparta watched. Sparta, silent, disciplined, wary, saw Athens' rising pride as a warning. Two visions of Greek life once united against a common enemy were drifting apart. A collision was coming. Not with Persia, not with an empire across the sea, but with one another. And when Athens and Sparta finally clashed, Greece itself would break. The golden age of Athens glowed like firelight against the world's dark. But fire has a nature. It spreads, it hungers, and sooner or later it invites wind. The rise of Athens, its confidence, its empire, its proud marble crown, cast a long shadow across Greece, and shadows do not go unnoticed. To the south, Sparta watched. Where Athens built fleets, Sparta sharpened spears. Where Athens debated in assembly, Sparta trained in silence. Where Athens celebrated the mind, Sparta honored endurance and obedience. Two cities, two worlds, two philosophies, destined to collide. The cause of the Peloponnesian War was not a single event, but a slow tightening of tension. Athenian influence crept into every corner of the Aegean. Its navy patrolled the sea like a living wall. City-states that once called Athens a friend now whispered the word master beneath their breath. Sparta, bound by duty to protect the independence of the Greek world, felt cornered. And when smaller conflicts flared, minor disputes, trade disagreements, quarrels between allies, they ignited the stored anger of decades. The war began in 431 BCE. It would last nearly 30 years. Athens believed the war would be swift, that their navy would dominate, that their walls would hold. The city had been rebuilt after the Persian invasion with something extraordinary. The long walls stretching from the heart of Athens to the port of Piraeus. With these walls, Athens could withstand siege indefinitely, bringing food and supplies from the sea. Sparta could rage outside the walls, burning farms, shouting insults, but Athens did not open its gates. The war should have favored Athens. But fate rarely favors one side for long. In the crowded city behind the walls, disease took root. A plague spread through the population with terrible speed. No blade, no tactic, no strategy could stop it. Men, women, children, all suffered. The city groaned under the weight of the death, and among the thousands taken by the plague was Pericles, the voice who had guided Athens through its golden age. With him died the city's calm direction. What remained was ambition without restraint. The war dragged on. Battles were fought across land and sea. Alliances shifted like tides. Cities were besieged, betrayed, surrendered. The theater of war consumed not only armies, but identity. Neighbors turned against neighbors. The idea of Greece, united in shared culture and language, broke and scattered. And then came the decision that would haunt Athens forever. Persuaded by confidence, or arrogance, or hope, Athens launched a massive expedition to Sicily, far across the sea, to conquer the city of Syracuse. It was the greatest fleet Athens had ever sent. It was led by brilliant, ambitious generals, and it was doomed. The campaign collapsed into disaster. The ships were lost, the soldiers captured. Many died in the quarries of Syracuse, starving, broken, forgotten underground. When the survivors' stories reached Athens, the city understood. Something had cracked. Sparta saw the opening. With unexpected aid from Persia, the old enemy turned opportunistic ally. Sparta built a navy. Slowly, the balance shifted. One by one, Athens' allies fell away. Grain routes were cut. Famine crept into the city. The once proud walls began to feel like a prison. In 404 BCE, Athens surrendered. The city of philosophers, playwrights, architects, and dreamers bowed, not burned, not erased, but humbled. The long walls were torn down to the sound of Spartan flutes. Greece had not been conquered from the outside. It had been undone from within. The dream of unity, the dream born at Marathon and Thermopylae, had dissolved into rivalry and ruin. But history does not end with defeat. It simply waits for the next voice to rise. And in the ashes of Athens and Sparta's struggle, a new power began to grow. A kingdom the Greeks had long dismissed as barbaric, a land of rugged hills, horsemen, and quiet ambition, Macedon. And at its head soon would stand a king whose name would echo across the world. While Athens mourned its lost glory, and Sparta struggled to rule what it had defeated, the Greek world grew tired. City-states argued, taxed one another, betrayed alliances, and shifted loyalties like sand in a restless tide. The idea of unity, once lit by the fires of Marathon, had faded into silence. And in that silence, another land watched. Macedon. To the Greeks of the south, Macedon had long been considered rough, undeveloped, almost barbaric. They spoke Greek, yes, but with a heavy accent. They lived not in grand marble cities, but among hills, forests, and open plains. Their warriors were horsemen, hunters, men of the rugged earth. To Athens and Sparta, Macedon was not a place of philosophy or art. It was a frontier. But frontiers have a way of producing strong leaders, and Macedon found one in Philip II. Philip had not been born into easy power. As a young man, he was taken hostage. He lived in Thebes, one of the great Greek cities, not as a free visitor, but as a political guarantee. Yet this captivity became his education. He observed the finest Greek generals. He studied their formations, their strategies, their weaknesses. He watched how cities governed themselves, how alliances formed and dissolved, how pride could fracture even the strongest walls. When Philip returned to Macedon, The kingdom was fragile, weakened by rival tribes and internal conflict. But Philip did not despair. He reorganized the army, trained its men, reshaped its strategy, and in doing so, he created something entirely new: the Macedonian phalanx. Greek armies traditionally fought in tight, heavy formations with large shields and short spears. Philip changed that. He armed his infantry with sarissas, spears so long that enemy soldiers could not reach them before being struck. He drilled his men relentlessly until their movement was like the motion of a single living creature. The Macedonian army became a wall of wood and iron that advanced with patience, precision, and unstoppable force. And Philip was not only a warrior, he was a strategist of politics. He did not always conquer by the sword. Sometimes he conquered by marriage, diplomacy, negotiation, or quiet influence. One by one, Greek city-states found themselves drawn into Macedon's orbit. Some joined willingly, some reluctantly, some only after their armies had been beaten. But Philip did not seek to destroy Greece. He sought to unify it. He believed that the Greeks, divided among themselves for centuries, should turn outward, toward the east, toward the land that had once marched against them. Persia. The old empire remained powerful, wealthy, and vast. But Philip believed Greece could challenge it, not as scattered cities, but as one people. And for the first time in centuries, unity felt possible. In 338 BCE, Philip proved this vision on the battlefield of Chaironeia. Here, the armies of Athens and Thebes, longtime rivals now forced into alliance, faced Macedon in desperate resistance. Philip commanded the right flank. On the left, his young son, a boy only 18. His name was Alexander. The battle was fierce. The Greeks fought with the fury of cities defending their identity. But the Macedonian phalanx held, advanced, and broke their lines. The sacred band of Thebes, an elite corps bound by devotion, fell to the last. When the dust settled, Greece belonged to Philip. Not enslaved, not destroyed, but unified, under a king who believed it was time to dream beyond the horizon. Philip called the Greek states to join him in a campaign against Persia. But before that dream could begin, he was struck down, assassinated. The world seemed to freeze. Macedon mourned. Greece watched with uncertainty. The throne passed to the young man who had stood on Philip's left flank, the one who had led a decisive charge at Chaironeia, the prince who had been taught by Aristotle, shaped by war, and raised with stories of heroes like Achilles. A young king, barely 20, Alexander. The world did not yet know what he would become, but history was holding its breath. When Philip II fell to an assassin's blade, the world of Greece held its breath. He had unified the city-states, forged an unstoppable army, and prepared to lead them eastward against the old Persian Empire, the same power that had once tried to crush Greece. But now, he was gone, and in his place stood a boy, Alexander, barely 20 years old, handsome, confident, and already carrying the fire of destiny in his eyes. Many thought the kingdom would crumble. Macedonian nobles plotted. Greek cities whispered rebellion. But before the echo of his father's funeral had faded, Alexander acted. He crushed the uprisings. Thebes, once the pride of Greece, dared to defy him, and Alexander made an example of it. The city was destroyed. Only temples and poets were spared. The message was clear. The age of hesitation was over. Then, at last, he turned his gaze east. Persia, the empire of Darius III, stretched across 3 continents. Its armies were vast, its wealth unimaginable. But Alexander was not daunted. He did not march merely to conquer. He marched to fulfill a vision, to unite Greece and Asia into one world. In the spring of 334 BCE, his army, 30,000 infantry, 5,000 cavalry, crossed the Hellespont, the narrow strait dividing Europe from Asia. As his ship landed on the far shore, Alexander leaped to the sand and cast a spear into the ground. He claimed Asia as his by right of conquest. The first test came at the Battle of the Granicus River. Persian satraps, governors of the western provinces, met him with cavalry and mercenaries. The river was deep, the banks high, the odds steep. Yet Alexander did not wait. He charged headlong across the water, leading his men into chaos. Arrows hissed, armor clashed, and by nightfall, Persia's western front had collapsed. The Greek cities of Asia Minor opened their gates to him. One by one, they declared him liberator. But liberation was not his goal. He wanted legacy. At Issus, in 333 BCE, he faced King Darius himself. The Persian army stretched as far as the eye could see. Yet Alexander's precision, speed, and fearless strategy shattered it. Darius fled, abandoning his mother, wife, and daughters to Alexander's mercy. They expected death. Instead, Alexander treated them with royal honor. He wanted the world to see not a destroyer, but a new kind of conqueror. Next came Egypt. The people, weary of Persian rule, welcomed him as a god. In the golden sands near the Nile, Alexander founded a new city, Alexandria, a beacon for knowledge, trade, and culture. Then he journeyed to the Oracle of Ammon at Siwa Oasis. The priests greeted him with words that would shape his myth forever. You are the son of Zeus Ammon. Whether Alexander believed it or not, he began to act as though the gods themselves walked beside him. From Egypt, he turned east once more, toward the heart of Persia. In the ancient cities of Babylon, Susa and Persepolis, his armies met the empire's finest. Battle after battle, Gaugamela, Arbela, Persia fell. Darius fled once again, only to be betrayed and murdered by his own men. When Alexander found the corpse, he wept. He sent the body home with full royal honors. The last king of Persia was dead, and Alexander, son of Macedon, became ruler of the largest empire the world had ever seen. But conquest had not satisfied him. It only fed his hunger. Beyond Persia lay more, strange lands, unknown rivers, endless horizons. And so, his march continued. By the time Alexander reached the far edge of Persia, he was no longer a mere king. He was a legend walking, a man whose victories had rewritten maps and silenced empires. But legends, once born, are never content to rest. He looked east. Beyond the deserts, Beyond the mountains, there were rumors of strange lands, vast rivers, and rulers who commanded armies of elephants. India. The march began again, across blazing deserts, through snow-covered passes of Bactria, into valleys where languages and faces changed with every sunrise. His army followed, exhausted, loyal, fearful, yet bound by something magnetic in their young king. In these lands, Alexander was no longer merely a conqueror. He was a seeker. He built cities in his name, dozens of them, leaving behind fragments of Greek architecture and thought like seeds scattered in foreign soil. He studied local customs, debated with philosophers, and offered sacrifices to unfamiliar gods. He began to speak of unity, of one empire for all mankind, where Greek and Persian, Macedonian and Egyptian would live as equals. But not everyone shared his vision. To many of his own men, he seemed to be slipping away from who he once was. He wore Persian robes, accepted divine honors, and demanded kneeling before him, a custom Greeks despised. Whispers grew, had their king forgotten he was mortal? Still, the march continued, into the land of the Indus. There, Alexander faced his greatest test. At the Battle of the Hydaspes, near the river Chelum, he met King Porus, a ruler who commanded elephants clad in iron and soldiers who fought like lions. The battle was chaos, trumpeting beasts, the crash of bronze and flesh, the river running red. Alexander was victorious, but afterward, when Porus was brought before him in chains, the young king asked, "How should I treat you?" Porus answered simply, "Like a king." And Alexander smiled. "So you shall be." He returned Porus's throne, an act that revealed the strange heart of his ambition. He did not only want to rule the world, he wanted to honor it, to merge it into something divine. But his men had reached their limit. Years of war, endless marches, homes far behind them, buried in memory. When Alexander demanded they push farther east, beyond the Ganges, into lands no Greek had ever seen, his soldiers refused. They begged him to turn back. For the first time, the conqueror of the world found himself powerless. He wept, not from defeat, but from knowing the edge of the world had come too soon. Reluctantly, he turned west, leading his army home through the blazing Gedrosian desert. Thousands died of thirst and heat. Yet Alexander survived, his body weakened but his will unbroken. When he finally reached Babylon, he dreamed again of new cities, new expeditions, of blending all nations into one family. But the gods, or perhaps fate, had other plans. In the summer, there are moments in history when a single life burns so brightly, the world is permanently changed by its glow. In the 4th century BCE, such a flame was born in the small Macedonian city of Pella. His name was Alexander, and when he was still just a boy, people whispered that he was not merely human, but something between man and myth. His father, King Philip II, had already turned Macedonia into a military powerhouse. Philip was brilliant, ruthless, and unstoppable. Until one night, in a theater full of nobles and guests, he was assassinated. Why? By whom? The truth was swallowed by whispers and shadows. But one thing was clear: a new king was needed. Alexander was only 20 when he took the throne, young, charismatic, brilliantly educated by Aristotle himself. People expected him to secure Macedonia, maybe expand a little, maybe prove himself. But Alexander looked far beyond Greece. He looked toward the largest empire the world had ever seen, Persia, and he did not want to coexist with it. He wanted to replace it. So the armies marched, across the sea, across the plains of Asia Minor, into lands where Greek soldiers had only heard legends of wealth, power, and kings who believed themselves divine. At the Battle of Issus, Alexander faced King Darius III of Persia. The two armies stretched for miles. Dust rose, shields locked, and in the chaos of thousands of men fighting for survival, Alexander found Darius and charged directly at him. Darius fled. That moment shattered the myth of Persian invincibility. From there, Alexander swept south, taking Egypt. In the desert, he founded Alexandria, a city meant to be the beating heart of Greek knowledge and culture, a place where the world's wisdom would collect like a river flowing into a vast sea. And then he marched east again, deeper, always deeper into Babylon, Persia, beyond the edges of world maps. Alexander no longer sought conquest. He sought unity, a single world, bound not by force alone, but by shared culture, shared cities, shared stories. He dressed like Persians, invited their nobles into his court, married into their families, encouraged his army to take wives from the lands they conquered. He believed cultures could blend into something greater, something eternal. But his soldiers did not always understand. Many did not want to become part of something new. They wanted to return home, to Greece, to Macedonia, to the familiar. And as they pushed farther east into India, they became exhausted. The jungles were thick, the rains endless, the elephants terrifying and relentless. At the Battle of the Hydaspes, Alexander won once more, but it was a victory that felt too costly. His army refused to go any farther. The dream paused. They turned back. When they reached Babylon, the great city welcomed them. But something had changed. Alexander had changed. The weight of his dream, a dream of one world, had begun to crush him. He was no longer simply a king. He was something strange, isolated, unreachable. Then, suddenly, he fell ill. Fever burned through him. Some say poison, some say exhaustion, some say the gods reclaimed what was never meant to belong to mortals. He died at just 32 years old. The world he built, so close to unified, shattered overnight. His generals, the Diadochi, carved the empire apart like lions tearing apart a fallen stag. Friends became enemies. Brothers became rivals. Blood poured again, as it always had, and yet something remained, a thread, a seed, a breath of Greece carried on the winds, across Egypt, Persia, India, everywhere his armies had walked. The world had changed forever. Ideas flowed like rivers, languages mixed, architecture, art, philosophy, all traveled, merged, and evolved. This was the beginning of what historians call the Hellenistic era, an age where Greek thought was not confined to Greece, but became the foundation for civilizations yet to come. The dream of Alexander did not die. It simply changed shape, carried forward by time itself. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine standing at the edge of a quiet sea at night. The waves move slowly, the stars hang above in silence, and the world feels ancient, as if time itself is breathing. That feeling, that soft weight of history, is what ancient Greece left behind. When we speak of Greece, we are not simply speaking of ruins, marble statues, or stories or gold written in dusty scrolls. We are speaking of an idea, a way of thinking about the world and ourselves that continues to shape how we live, speak, love, question, and dream. Let us reflect. In the beginning, Greece was only a scattered collection of city-states, each small, each vulnerable, each fiercely independent. And yet, out of that tension, that friction, and that chaotic competition, something extraordinary emerged. The Greeks asked questions no one else had dared to ask. What is beauty? What is honor? What is truth? Why are we here? They argued, debated, disagreed, and from their disagreements, philosophy was born. A discipline not of answers, but of questions. A journey inward. And from their struggles and fears, they told stories, myths that explained the world through gods who lived, loved, and suffered like humans. These stories were not just entertainment. They were reflections of humanity's deepest shadows and brightest hopes. And from their love of form, proportion, and harmony, they built temples and sculptures that did not simply decorate the world. They interpreted it. They believed beauty could be measured, reasoned, and expressed through the human form, in balance and grace. Then came democracy. Not perfect, not pure, and not flawless, but a beginning. A seed for the idea that humans could shape their own destiny. That power did not always have to flow from kings or conquerors, but from citizens who shared a voice. Yet, Greece was not eternal. It fought itself. City-state against city-state. Brother against brother. Pride against wisdom. And when the world changed, when Philip of Macedon unified Greece, and when Alexander carried its culture across continents, Greece did not vanish. It transformed. Greek thought traveled with soldiers, scholars, architects, merchants. It blended with Egypt and Alexandria. It fused with Persia and the East. It shaped India's philosophy and Rome's politics. Even as Greece fell under Roman rule, Rome became Greek in mind, a quiet irony of history. Centuries passed. Empires rose and broke like waves on stone. Kings faded. Wars burned and died. Libraries crumbled. Cities sank into dust. But Greek ideas did not die. They went underground, hidden in manuscripts, preserved by scholars in Byzantium, by translators in Damascus and Baghdad, by monks in cold stone monasteries in Europe. And then, one day, the world rediscovered them, and we called it the Renaissance. We rewrote our understanding of humanity because Greece had already asked the questions we were learning to ask again. And so here we stand, thousands of years later, shaped by a civilization that has not existed in physical form for millennia, yet still whispers to us through art, literature, architecture, science, and politics, and the quiet questions we ask ourselves at night. What is the good life? What is courage? What does it mean to be human? Greece is no longer a place in history. It is a mirror we hold up to ourselves. It reminds us that the civilizations are not measured only in power, land, or armies, but in the ideas they leave behind. Ideas that stretch across time. Ideas that refuse to die. Ideas that live in us. And now, the night grows quiet. We have walked through ages, from the fires of the Bronze Age to the marble columns of Athens, from the voice of Socrates in the market square to the thunder of Alexander's armies crossing mountains and deserts. We have watched cities rise, collapse, and rise again. We have seen how stories, ideas, and fragile dreams can outlive stone and steel. Ancient Greece was never just a place. It was a conversation, one that began thousands of years ago and still continues every time someone asks a question instead of accepting an answer. It taught us that the world is not merely to be lived in, but to be understood. It taught us that even small islands and small voices can shape the destiny of the world. And perhaps most importantly, it taught us that knowledge, curiosity, beauty, and wonder are not luxuries. They are the fuel of civilization. Today, somewhere in the world, a child stares at the night sky and wonders who made the stars. Somewhere, someone writes poetry to ease their heart. Somewhere, a student reads Plato for the first time and feels the spark of a thought awakening. Somewhere, a city is built, designed with balance, order, and light in mind. Somewhere, someone learns the word democracy and believes that their voice matters. All of those threads lead back to a shoreline in the Aegean Sea, where the waves once carried the voices of the first dreamers. History is not gone. It is alive. Inside memory, inside language, inside us. Thank you for walking this path tonight, for listening, for remembering, for wondering. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. And let us know once again where you're listening from tonight. Maybe someone from your country is hearing this same story right now, somewhere under the same sky. Good night, and let the past keep whispering.